New information about CM Punk's AEW dismissal, as it has now been revealed that the Young Bucks were informed by AEW that they had been sent a legal letter around the same time of the pitched CM Punk The Elite resolution meeting, based upon comments that were made on being the Elite. It's also been reported that the Young Bucks reportedly wanted to wait 6 months before having a sit-down meeting with CM Punk. It's also being reporting that Impact Wrestling believe they could sign CM Punk tomorrow. Plenty of details on that, plus a lot more about his departure from the company. Plus, SmackDown could be leaving Fox as they look at other networks that could possibly host WWE's Blue Brand show. LA Knight reportedly is in line for a mega push. Details on what that will entail. The reason for AEW All In not actually airing on Max, the streaming service, has also been revealed. Drew McIntyre comments on rumors surrounding his WWE future and a possible contract extension. John Cena has boosted SmackDown ticket sales. We'll let you know just how much he has. Gable Steveson reportedly has been removed from the WWE NXT roster. Also, AEW is not reportedly talking about a return for Jade Cargill just yet. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of professional wrestling, and we've got so many more new and interesting details surrounding CM Punk's departure from AEW, meetings that were set up but may have not been set up, details on legal letters being sent at certain points, the Young Bucks' conditions for a sit-down meeting with CM Punk, Punk's working relationship with Tony Khan, frustration backstage over CM Punk's working relationship with Tony Khan, the feeling now that CM Punk has been removed from AEW. There's plenty to get into, so let's get straight into it, starting off with the idea that the Young Bucks were indeed willing to compromise and sit down with CM Punk if he lasted 6 months without any drama. Of course, we know that indeed did not happen, but the Young Bucks had specific parameters in mind if CM Punk wanted to work with them. The Young Bucks and CM Punk have had their history with AEW All Out 2022, still remaining fresh in fans' minds just over a year later. It has been a tumultuous couple of weeks regarding CM Punk. At AEW All In, Punk was involved in yet another backstage altercation. However, this one would be different than those in the past in various ways. Namely, Punk not only fought with Jack Perry, but he also reportedly lunged at AEW President Tony Khan while furiously quitting the company. These events would leave Tony Khan with no other choice but to fire the Chicago native with cause, despite Punk's drawing power and status as the company's real world champion. Punk has yet to comment on the matter, however, many are expecting Punk to eventually comment, and those comments have been described previously that they could be explosive. Now, the Wrestling Observer newsletter is now reporting that the Young Bucks were willing to work with CM Punk if he could last 6 months without causing controversy within AEW. This is what Dave Meltzer had to say, quote, according to one person very close to the situation, the Young Bucks had said if 6 months went by without CM Punk having any issues, they would have been willing to sit down and work with him. Now, a report has been circulating since Punk's firing, suggesting that the Elite blew off an arranged and agreed meeting with CM Punk, but that turned out not to be the case, again, depending on which side you talk to. Now, this is where it gets really interesting as well, because according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, at the same time that a meeting between the Elite and CM Punk was pitched, and it had reportedly been pitched to take place in Atlanta at the double taping of AEW Dynamite's and AEW Collision prior to AEW All In London, around that time, AEW had informed the Young Bucks of a legal letter sent to the company claiming that they had violated the agreement to not talk negatively about the other publicly. Evidently, it was from a Being the Elite skit that was a storyline that had started years earlier about Matt Jackson screwing up an endorsement deal. Now, if you're not familiar for what this agreement was, according to many reports and outlets, prior to CM Punk's return, it had been reported that many of the parties had signed agreements not to disparage each other publicly, and that was part of a condition for Punk's return, as well as part of a condition to bring the Elite back following their suspension last year after the Brawl Out incident. So the suggestion is that a legal letter was sent to AEW surrounding this skit on Being the Elite. Now, they haven't said, or Dave Meltzer hasn't said specifically that it was CM Punk that sent that letter, but it's certainly implied. Now, what about the overall atmosphere since CM Punk has left, or was fired, rather, from AEW? Well, according to, again, Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, CM Punk's firing has led to a positive influence on the AEW locker room. As I mentioned, it's been a tumultuous couple of weeks for AEW regarding CM Punk. Eventually, everything that's led to CM Punk being fired with cause. But the Wrestling Observer newsletter is now reporting that some backstage have viewed Punk's firing as a dark cloud being lifted off the locker room. Meltzer said, quote, "After CM Punk's firing, many talked about the backstage atmosphere in AEW as if a dark cloud had been lifted over their heads and how much fun it was at the weekend shows." Again, it's being reported now that the locker room is happier. Do you believe that to be the case, or do you believe that's not going to be the case? Now, about what CM Punk could be doing in the future, where he could be going next. Of course, there have been the rumors and the reports he could go to WWE. We reported yesterday that it had been put out there that the final decision was in the hands of Nick Khan and Triple H, as opposed to Paul Triple H Levesque, as well as Endeavor's CEO, Ari Emanuel, being that he's going to have the final say on a lot of things once TKO Group Holdings is officially merged next week. Obviously, WWE and UFC merging together to form TKO Group Holdings. Ari Emanuel is going to be the CEO of that new company, so he could have a big say in CM Punk's return or possible return to WWE. But there have been suggestions and possibilities that Punk could go to another pro wrestling company, namely Impact Wrestling. According to Dave Meltzer in his Wrestling Observer newsletter, there is a belief that we could see CM Punk in Impact Wrestling at some point. Meltzer said, quote, "The reality is that if you can draw money in wrestling and more in a hotly competitive marketplace, you will almost always have the option to come back and time heals all wounds. For those who believe Punk's career is over, the only way that would be the case is if he decides it himself. While the money may not be as good, he could walk into Impact with open arms tomorrow, or New Japan Pro Wrestling soon enough if he would choose to." Now, obviously, this goes with prior reports that CM Punk could possibly land in Impact Wrestling. It was put out there by Mike Johnson from PW Insider that there was hope or actual optimism that Punk could land in Impact at some point. Of course, Bound for Glory, their flagship pay-per-view, is going to be taking place in Chicago later this year in mid-October. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see if indeed Punk does go to Impact. Do you think there's a possibility CM Punk could end up in Impact Wrestling, maybe prior to a WWE return? Let me know your thoughts about that as well. Now, what about the investigation that led into CM Punk's firing as well? Of course, there are some new details too regarding All Elite Wrestling's investigation into the actions of CM Punk, which led to the company firing him last week with cause. Even though it was a week full of multiple pay-per-view events featuring a lot of outstanding wrestling, the news of AEW firing CM Punk last Saturday has dominated the headlines over the last week or so. After all, CM Punk was one of AEW's biggest stars, who not only had a wrestler contract, but also an employee contract as well. As a former two-time AEW World Champion, he was viewed as one of the company's biggest stars. Now, again, this all comes after this incident involving Jungle Boy backstage at AEW All In London at Wembley Stadium. Now, in this week's Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer revealed that AEW did a thorough investigation while also hiring an outside legal firm before it was determined that they needed to fire Phil Brooks. Quote, "The investigation evidently included the Jaguars Khan AEW-owned legal staff, as well as an outside legal firm the company hired with no affiliation to AEW or any of its talent, both conducting investigations. They reviewed the footage and spoke to all the witnesses. They also spoke to several of the top wrestlers about the totality of the situation regarding Punk and others not having anything to do with the incident and who were not there to see the incident itself, nor asked about the incident, but also asked about the bigger picture. Both groups recommended to Khan, unanimously he said, that Punk be terminated, but those were only recommendations and it was Khan's decision. Khan easily could have kept it under wraps and waited until after the pay-per-view in Chicago, the market that would be the most sympathetic to Punk. Instead, as soon as the investigation had ended, he made his decision. The company announced the firing, and before the live television show started, he went in front of a very hostile live crowd in Chicago. Of course, we do have footage of that. Be sure to check out our prior videos of when Tony Khan spoke to the audience in Chicago. But what's quite fascinating with all of this, with Dave Meltzer and his coverage of CM Punk, some have suggested that he and Brian Alvarez have been part of the reason for some of the backstage turmoil within All Elite Wrestling. Eric Bischoff just the other day blamed Dave Meltzer for his part in all of this, whereas Meltzer and Brian Alvarez himself have suggested that they were too nice to CM Punk on occasion. Well, what's absolutely fascinating is in the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer has put forward a crazy idea that in the event that CM Punk doesn't end up returning to WWE, that he could actually at some point come back to AEW. He said, quote, "If WWE doesn't sign him, I wouldn't rule out AEW giving him another shot, as crazy as that may sound today, for the same reasons, although that would be very difficult, Meltzer writes. Meltzer mentioned that Punk's signing proved to be very big for Khan's promotion. He wrote in this week's Wrestling Observer newsletter, if you draw money in this business at one point, people will always give you the chance to do it again. Meltzer feels that those who believe Punk's wrestling career is over are probably going to get proven wrong. Regarding Punk's potential return to WWE, Meltzer noted that WWE CEO Nick Khan and WWE's Chief Content Officer Paul Triple H Levesque would make that decision. He also said, depending on the timing following his back surgery, that WWE's Executive Chairman Vince McMahon could make the call as well. Meltzer pointed out that Punk would draw ratings, shift plenty of merchandise, and receive gigantic reactions from fans if he were to return to WWE, which of course would ultimately hurt AEW as well. Punk's exit, though, from WWE back in 2014, among other factors, could play a role in WWE's decision to bring him back, according to Meltzer. However, he explained that circumstances are now very different compared to just a few years ago. Meltzer said that Punk's potential return to WWE would be new for the organization's fans and wouldn't be seen as his fourth return to television in a 2+ year period, of course referencing his back and forth returns to AEW through injury, suspension, and the like. Now, when it comes to Punk's actual working relationship with Tony Khan, according to Meltzer and the Wrestling Observer newsletter, CM Punk and Tony Khan had a very close relationship before the events at AEW All In, which may suggest and provide a reason as to why Punk was given so many chances by the AEW president. Now, as reported by the Wrestling Observer newsletter, CM Punk had 2 contracts while he was employed by AEW, one as a pro wrestler and one as an employee. The report goes on to state that no one exactly knew what Punk's title was in regard to the backstage role, but he was working alongside Tony Khan on creative aspects on AEW Collision. It's also believed that Ace Steel was a part of the creative team for the Saturday night show, as he was brought back into the company after being fired following the All Out 2022 incident. Steel was brought back due to the request of CM Punk. However, it was reported on September 7th, that being yesterday, that Steele has once again been informed that his services are no longer required within AEW. Now, despite the closer relationship between the head of the promotion and the former world champion, Khan believed that Punk's actions at Wembley Stadium were inexcusable. Following the announcement that Punk had been released, Khan would appear on Collision just hours later to elaborate on his decision. Khan would later give his statement on the matter, noting that he feared for his life while at All In. So it has been kind of reported that possibly, again, this sort of close relationship that Khan had with CM Punk may have been a factor of why he stuck around as long as he did within All Elite Wrestling. So what are your thoughts on all of that? I know it's a lot of information there, but what are your thoughts on the legal letters? What are your thoughts on the requests of the Young Bucks or the conditions of the Young Bucks? They'd be willing to sit down with CM Punk if he went 6 months without drama. What are your thoughts on the possibility CM Punk could go to Impact Wrestling at any point? What about a return to WWE? Is that feasible? Let me know your thoughts on all of it in the comment section below. Really interested to see what you guys have to say. Now, I'll switch gears here and talk about Friday Night SmackDown because the show may not be on Fox that much longer. There has been a potential indication of what the future spells for WWE SmackDown's future on the Fox network. The recent cancellation of a popular Fox-produced WWE podcast may spell out a change of network for the Blue brand once the existing TV deal expires, explaining that despite SmackDown's consistently strong ratings, it may not be cost-effective enough to retain. Dave Meltzer writes in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Fox has cancelled its out-of-character WWE podcasts. Some see that as another sign that SmackDown will be moving from Fox at the end of the current contract. Analysts have believed that for some time, that even with the ratings the show delivers, that it isn't cost-effective, especially if WWE wants the $205 million per year deal to increase to $310 million. Still, the show wins the night almost every week of late, and numbers are gaining, so they could change the outcome of that. It also does lower ad rates than the other network programming on Friday because of the stigma of wrestling and wrestling fans to network advertisers. Earlier in the year, Fox CEO Lachlan Murdoch discussed a renewal of their TV deal with WWE, calling them, quote, great partners. Despite this, Murdoch revealed that a rental would depend on the rest of their sports portfolio on the network. Obviously, yesterday, a massive update was given on the sale of WWE to Endeavor and the merger of UFC under a new company titled TKO Group Holdings. That merger is set to complete next week, so obviously that's going to have a big say in where SmackDown lands next. So what do you think about the future of SmackDown? Do you think it's going to be on Fox? Do you think it's going to be elsewhere? Let me know your thoughts and predictions about that, as always, in the comment section below. And we spoke quite a lot the last couple of days about LA Knight, a new contract for him, and it's also now being reported by a third outlet, in addition to Mike Johnson of PW Insider, in addition to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select. Now Dave Meltzer is reporting that LA Knight indeed is set for a mega push. LA Knight's popularity has translated to strong ratings, crowd reactions, and merchandise sales within WWE, and management is now starting to recognize his success. It was recently reported that WWE and Knight have been negotiating a new long-term deal, which is either close to closing or has already been closed and pen has been put to paper. Dave Meltzer has provided further insight on the vision of Knight in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, writing, quote, Knight is expected to get a mega push going forward, given that the ratings for his segments and his merchandise sales have both been very strong. The crowd reaction alone would help you, but in many cases, if WWE thinks that it's a fad and there isn't economic indications, they only take crowd reactions to a certain level. But with Knight, the success is across the board. PW Insider also reported that the company is renegotiating his deal for as long as another 5 years. So it's being suggested certainly that again, he is renegotiating his contract, that is very close to being agreed, and this mega push is on the horizon, partly in fact due to strong crowd reactions, but also because of other important metrics such as merchandise and also television ratings too. Now, going back to AEW, there was a report and rumour, wasn't there, prior to AEW All In at London's Wembley Stadium that the event was going to be streaming on Max. Of course, that didn't happen. Instead, it was broadcast on traditional pay-per-view. Now, the original streaming plans for AEW All In at London's Wembley Stadium were for it to be on Max, but of course, as I mentioned, this didn't happen. The August 27, 2023 pay-per-view was reportedly supposed to stream on the HBO platform, which serves as the on-demand home for other AEW content. Dave Meltzer wrote about AEW All In not being on the platform in the current issue of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, writing, quote, it was widely assumed this is true, but sources outside of AEW have confirmed that the hoped idea for All In was to air on Max, and the reason it ended up on pay-per-view is because the technology wasn't ready at the time, and the decision had to be made one way or the other. I believe the technology is ready now. There still has to be a financial deal worked out because the show was a giant success on pay-per-view, so it makes no sense for AEW to put a show going forward on Max that would be such a big pay-per-view success unless WBD makes it economically make sense for AEW. I can see the argument and have made it myself that you want as many people seeing the show in this instance because of the crowd, but that's in this day's TV and not a subscription streaming service. Bloomberg reported that Max is going to start airing live sports, noting basketball, baseball and hockey starting shortly. Wrestling was not mentioned. The strategy, according to the article, was to put these shows on the service for free, and then in March, when the NCAA basketball tournament takes place, they will launch a new sports tier that will be at an additional price. Now, Max, known as HBO Max outside of the United States, launched in May 2020, with its name in the US being changed in May 2023, with international versions of the over-the-top service beginning to roll out in June 2021. In August of this year, The Verge reported that Max lost 1.8 million subscribers in the first 3 months of the rebrand from HBO Max to Max in the United States. Warner Bros. Discovery stated that this was a churn based at the following end of The Last of Us Season 1 and the Succession finale. So we'll have to wait and see indeed what happens when it comes to AEW and possible events being broadcast or streamed on Max. Is that something you would like to see in the future? But we'll have to wait and see. Now, obviously, when it comes to All In, there was a massive crowd announced for All In, but some new information sheds some light on the actual attendance. At AEW All In London, which took place at Wembley Stadium in England, All Elite Wrestling announced during the broadcast that paid attendance was 81,035 people. Again, an absolutely massive number for AEW that plenty of people were talking about. And again, it's broke record certainly for AEW in addition to that. But the question then becomes, as I mentioned, about how did they calculate this number and what was the actual figure of people inside the stadium too. Meanwhile, AEW CEO and General Manager Tony Khan mentioned that there were likely 90,000 people in attendance, counting comp tickets, people who were working there and others. In this week's Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer wrote that it was probably around 85,000 plus people in the building, or at least something close to that. He said, quote, regarding Wembley Stadium, WrestleTic's final number on the show was 83,131. which would be an estimate of the number in the building, but not including those in suites because that number could only be estimated. Given the capacity of the building and being there, that's very close to what I had figured, but figuring if suites were used and estimating that figure would be 85,371. At either of those numbers, it would be the largest verifiable crowd in wrestling history, just as the 81,305 would be the largest paid crowd ever. We do expect an audited number to come in, but it would likely only have paid and gate, not the building total, but it has not just yet. The estimate was that there were about 786 left as far as tickets open and not being sold, and the ending capacity of what was used. The estimate was 12,000 to 14,000 seats blocked off due to staging and obstructing views. Tony Khan used the number nearly 90,000 for those in the building, including comps and suites. Wembley Stadium and the London Police did not list any numbers, and the stadium said they don't release ticket numbers. So again, we might find out more when it comes to the future about, again, auditing numbers and stuff like that, but we'll just have to wait and see if we get those numbers eventually at some point. Now, Drew McIntyre has spoken about his WWE future amid a lot of speculation about new contracts, if he will sign one or not, and possibly an exit from the company at some point in the future. Of course, Drew McIntyre made his return to WWE back at the Money in the Bank event in London, where he confronted Intercontinental Champion Gunther after his victory against Matt Riddle on the show. McIntyre had been off WWE television for 3 months, not appearing since WrestleMania 39, where he and Sheamus were defeated by Gunther in an Intercontinental Championship 3-way match. Amid McIntyre's absence, speculation about his future with the company emerged, as it was reported that his contract was set to expire in early 2024. McIntyre has yet to re-sign with the company and has now commented on his contract expiration rumours. Speaking to the Hindusian Times ahead of Superstar Spectacle in India, he said, quote, "I mean, I keep reading the internet myself. I just saw something earlier. The internet keeps talking about my future, I guess. But my focus is on the here and now. Like, I don't look to the future. I don't look to the past. I look to the present. And my job right now is just making sure we give everybody in Hyderabad the best show possible. And I'll continue to give the best performance I can at every show, and I can see I don't plan to be anywhere else. That's as much as I could give." Of course, McIntyre has recently formed an alliance with Matt Riddle on Raw, where the two are becoming apparently reluctant partners. So what do you think about McIntyre's future? He says that he can't see himself being anywhere else. Is that an indication he's going to stick around in WWE, or is he just brushing off those rumors? Let me know your thoughts about that in the comment section below. Now, John Cena recently made his return to WWE television, and we can see how he's affected ticket sales as well. Despite debuting for WWE over 20 years ago, John Cena is still a massive draw for the company. It was announced that Cena will be appearing on nearly every episode of SmackDown in September and October, with the only exception being tonight. Of course, he's going to be in India to wrestle on the Superstar Spectacle show. Following the announcement, extra tickets began to be sold for the select events. As reported in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, a breakdown of how many extra tickets were sold for each event following the addition of John Cena have been published. The additional tickets sold are as follows. To no surprise, WrestleTix did an analysis of Cena's drawing power. In Denver on September 15, he moved 856 tickets in a few days after the announcement of him being on the show. In Glendale, Arizona on September 22nd, they quickly sold nearly 1,500 tickets, 1,469 tickets to be specific. In St. Louis on October 6, it was 1,541. In San Antonio on October 20, it was 997. In Tulsa on October 13, it was 622. In Milwaukee on October 27, it was 1,489. So again, just goes to show how much of a draw John Cena still is for WWE at this point. There's been a lot of talk and discussion about Gable Steveson's WWE future, and it looks like Gable Steveson could be finished with NXT after only one match. Gable Steveson made his in-ring debut at NXT's Great American Bash in July against Baron Corbin, but the match was widely derided as it ended in a double countout. Steveson also received a frosty reception from the fans in Cedar Park, Texas, as they booed the Olympic gold medalist and chanted "You're not Angle" at Steveson. Baron Corbin was even cheered. The double countout finish appeared to be setting up a second encounter between Steveson and Corbin, but Dave Meltzer has reported in the Wrestling Observer newsletter that Steveson has officially been removed from the NXT roster, and there are no plans to use him in NXT at the moment. This comes after it was emerged this week that Steveson had withdrawn from the upcoming Amateur Wrestling World Championships. He qualified for the event in June, but informed USA Wrestling that he won't be heading to Serbia for the tournament, with Mason Parris taking his place. Meltzer reported that Steveson not competing was a WWE decision, and this indicates WWE may not allow Steveson to return to the NCAA wrestling or compete at the 2024 Summer Olympic Games. So what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on him being removed from the NXT roster? Is this an indication he's going to the main roster? What do you think it means? Let me know your thoughts about that. Finally, an update on Jade Cargill. We've spoken about her quite a lot recently as well. AEW hasn't seen Jade Cargill since she lost the TBS Championship to Chris Statlander at Double or Nothing. That was a big surprise, but her absence since then is also a bit shocking for some fans. Jade Cargill said she recently was in, there's no place she'd rather be than in AEW. Tony Khan also addressed her absence recently, and he said he hopes to have her back soon. The Wrestling Observer newsletter provided a bit of an update on Jade Cargill's current situation with AEW. It was noted that at this time there is no talk about when Jade Cargill's AEW hiatus will end. He writes, quote, "There has been no talk of late regarding if or when Cargill would return to wrestle here." So, as of right now, there's no talk about her coming back, but her recent comments do indicate that when she does, it will be to AEW. But there you go, guys. This is the latest pro wrestling news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.